Listen to two.
Which two are we missing?
Listen down.
Dallin.
Levi's probably,
Pardon me?
Levi's probably gone.
Levi? Okay. So other than that, everyone else is present. We're going to go ahead and start with a Pledge of Allegiance authored by or led by Jennifer Baptista, and then opening remarks by Lisa Lydiard.
Please stand. Repeat the pledge. I
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Opening remarks means prayer. Our dear kind Heavenly Father, we're grateful that we can be together as a Pleasant Grove city family, and we're grateful for those people that we meet down here and for being able to build relationships and help us be able to focus in on what we're talking about tonight, talk to each other with respect, and do what we can to help further the cause of liberty. And we're grateful for all of our blessings and help those in our city that need help and are having a hard time, that they will be able to receive what they need. And if we can help, that we will be able to heed the call. And we're grateful for all the things that we have, and say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you. And we are live streaming tonight, is that right?
No, we're working on it.
Working on it? We got a little bit of sun, don't we?
Yes.
Skiing or no?
Soccer,
Soccer.
4 hours on the soccer field.
Scott, are there any changes to tonight's minutes, or are you?
You're over here in the corner.
Okay. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda? No changes, okay.
Mayor, I move that we approve the agenda.
Thank you, Ben.
Second.
Thank you, Jay. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, we'll have an open session now. If anybody has an item not on the agenda, or it's not an open session or public hearing, please feel free to state your name and address, and then we'll take it.
Matt Godsey, 1026 East, 1100 North. I'd just like to get an update on the PSB committee, where we're standing on the description and everything.
Okay, so Scott has written the job descriptions, and then he sent it to me for review before we send it to the council. I looked at it, and at first I wanted something more robust, but then I thought about it and I said, no, I think we probably ought to actually go with less is more. And the reason being is probably the people that are going to volunteer are well-versed in the issues that, at hand. So he's reviewed that. We're going to circulate it to the council. It will be on next week's agenda, and then we'll get it out to the public.
Thank you for the update.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to speak in open session? Okay, we'll close the open session and come back up here. Our first item is to review and discuss accessory apartments. And Ken's going to lead us in this. He's distributed, I would say, let's see, 64 megabytes of different attachments. So we all completely devoured this.
There will be a test. Okay, so my intent is to not review all 64 megabytes in this presentation, just to briefly review what is in the packet, some of the key points that we have. David, could you maybe hit the light there? All right, so a lot of these key points are in the summary of the packet that the Council and Planning Commission have received, but there's a few other things that I've added to it. First off, there have been various times in zoning since pre-1951, when the first zoning code was adopted, when accessory apartments have been permitted and constructed in single-family residential zones. So before 51, there was no zoning ordinance. So it was just, come get your building permit and do what you want. So there were things that could have been, we are aware that there are some really old apartments that probably were built before 1951. And then we've had some according to our building permit records, we can find some clear up through 1985 that were permitted. So there's a substantial period of Pleasant Grove where these types of apartments were permitted. Between 1963 and 1985, accessory apartments were specifically allowed, as mentioned in the city code in Pleasant Grove. An ordinance was adopted in 1978, which provided for their approval with a special use permit. So it made it just maybe a little bit more difficult. You'd have to go through a special use permit approval process. In 1985, a rehauled zoning code eliminated accessory apartments as a permitted use in all single-family residential zones. So it kind of put a halt on things. So 15 years between 1985 and 2000, there's no record of that I could find of discussions or whatever. Perhaps there are somewhere, but it's not something that we found. Then in the year 2000, we found an attempt to amend the code to allow for accessory apartments. And since 2000, we have had 6 ordinances come forward in 6 different attempts that have tried to review and prepare the way for a legal permitting of accessory apartments without success. Currently, accessory apartments are permitted in the following zones. RM7, the multifamily zone. So we have some of those on the north side of State Street, both on the east and west sides of town. There are some of those zones there. Downtown Village mixed use zone, we are currently in that zone. So it is permitted in this zone. And the Grove mixed housing. So on the between State Street and the freeway, there are areas zone mixed housing where an accessory apartment would be permitted. In 3 public surveys held in 2009 with 249 responses, 2011 with 1,295 responses, and 2014 with 885 responses, approximately 3/4, and this is in all 3 of these, it was very close, between 75 to 79% each time. 3/4 of the respondents indicated support for allowing accessory apartments. Okay, this is a staff opinion, but I think I need to express it. Those in the public who have concerns or desires regarding accessory apartments have had opportunities to make their wishes known. We should value and act upon the input we have received. There has been ample public input on the issue, and that there exists now more than enough information to make a decision. There's a proposed ordinance that has recently been reviewed and recommended by the Planning Commission to allow and regulate accessory apartments. So if we determine at some point tonight or some other time that the input we have already received is not sufficient, then I would recommend, and this is based on conversations that I've had with Scott and Tina, that we just bring forward one simple question to the public in a public hearing setting. And that question would be, should Pleasant Grove allow accessory apartments in single-family neighborhoods? Nothing new. We've asked this many times, but if we need to ask it again and see who is there to answer it, we should offer 3 potential responses. 1, no. 2, yes, without regulations. In other words, we just permit them. We put it on the list in the zoning code that it's a permitted use, and that's it. We let it happen just like we let single-family homes be built. Number 3 would be yes, but with some regulations. So with that, I think we can put to rest whether or not we're going to do something about this.
Coming under your breath there.
So if the answer is no, if the majority respond no, then review the methods that we have of enforcement and then determine if we need to increase or improve any of our enforcement abilities of assuring that no more illegal situations occur, and we follow up on those that we find out about. And we inform the public. We make sure that there's good understanding of what the city's position is. If the majority answers yes, without regulations, then we need to amend the city code to list them as a permitted use. Then we're done. If the majority answers yes, with some regulations, then we need to begin a review and hearings process for the regulations that are desired. And then from there, amend the city code to provide those regulations, which could also cover the enforcement. However, I don't believe we should try to define what some regulations means just yet. We just need to get that answer, and so that we know that we have a path to pursue, and then we can figure it out from there. Okay, that's all I have on that. So I don't know if there are any questions as to the content of the packet that I've distributed, but I'm happy to answer any. Or
Let me ask one. So we have 3 zones where we do currently permit them, the RM7, the downtown village, and the Grove. What is the level of regulation we have in those 3 zones that we currently allow?
we just permit them.
So there's no regulation. right
Yes,
now?
without regulation.
Okay.
But let's define them, because in the Grove and then the down, they're not defined like they'd be in a single family residence. So they're two different, we're not approving what we have in the Grove or the downtown.
Well, not what exists there currently. I'm just saying if a single family home,
Yeah.
if a single family home that exists right now in the Grove mixed housing wants to do an accessory apartment, they would come in and we would permit them to do that.
Right. So that pertain to single family homes.
Right.
Right.
Do we know all the apartments that are down there?
Yeah, all the regular approved apartments, but as far as accessory apartments, I can't say that I'm aware of any that are down there. And that's just the problem that we have currently, because we haven't regulated or haven't permitted them. These things have been happening under the board all the time. And so we don't really know where all the accessory apartments are. A lot of people can probably identify some that they know exist in various areas of town. I know that there are some areas of town that are probably more predominant than others. We have had attempts to identify a number as to approximately how many exist in town. That's a very difficult thing to do because we haven't had any registration or permitting of them. However, we have had some assistance in the past of people who have identified those that they were aware of, including some realtors that gave us lists that didn't say it was an accessory apartment, but based on the information that was listed in the realtor information, you can assume that that probably is what's going on. So we kind of have a foggy idea that there might be several hundred out there.
As we permit them or allow them, we don't have a list of what we've got.
No, it's never been officially identified on a list.
Any questions for him?
Can we get the FAQ on the website under community development?
Yeah, we can put it up there.
Really, really good. I feel like that answered a lot.
Yeah.
And it'd be nice to be able to refer people to that specifically, you know, the numbered question that they have concerns about.
Okay.
And by the way, Ken, this was extremely helpful. So
Good.
having not been involved since 1953, I know that surprises everyone, but it was just nice to have everything just chronologically.
And I apologize, we had some difficulty for the accessibility of all those exhibits. I tried to first email them out in pieces and then we had them on the Dropbox, but I think we just had difficulty either way of being able to access all of them. So,
They came across fine for me.
okay.
Yeah.
But I am willing to make specific paper copies. I think Diana's got one. If anybody else wants a paper copy of all of them, we can do that.
And I like the electronic version. So, some facts. We have them. They exist, right?
Yeah.
And the question really before this council and every other body that's been before us is, do we officially recognize them? And what would the purpose be of recognizing them? well, would be to permit them. But why would you permit them unless there was some kind of reason to provide safety, health, or welfare through some kind of regulation? So where are we at with that part of this? I mean, because to me, it's like you either approve them or you don't, right? And then the purpose of doing it would be because you're gonna recognize them and then there's a reason to do so.
Well, I guess I would first respond by saying we know very well that this is a substantial component of our housing in the community right now. For us to continually say, we're not going to regulate them, we're not going to recognize them, we're going to stick our head in the sand and say, no, 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 I think is irresponsible of the city. I think we should have some code that regulates what exists with our current housing market. So I think that's the biggest reason right there.
And you asked us not to get into the detail of regulation at this point.
Right, right. So we have, like I say, there is an ordinance that has been reviewed with some suggested regulations, but that can all be put to the side and we start over.
So I guess the very first question is, do we recognize them and change code as such?
Right.
So
Mayor,
everybody-
I think there's kind of two different things going on. One would be that we need to take care of what's currently already existing, and then also look at how we're going to move forward in the future. So there almost might be two components to this.
Okay.
One, how do we deal with what's already out there that we haven't done anything about? Number two, how do we want to deal with them in the future? So in some ways, the council could say, okay, we want to grandfather what's existing, and then we're going to put down the clamps on anything in the future. Or we can have something that's kind of a blanket thing, which just says, this is what we're going to allow. We're going to take care of this currently, and then in the future, we're going to allow them as well under these same standards. So there's kind of two different things to think about.
All right. Can you stay right there?
Mhm.
Can we get planning permission to talk a little bit about what you guys have been working on with respect to accessory apartments?
Survey with Ken, we had an extensive conversation about accessory apartments, and then having now's decision to move it up to you, to let you take a look at it and review what we need to do. And that's why we're here tonight. We've had many discussions about, I know at least in my neighborhood, there's probably 3 or 4 that they're there, they exist, and we need to do something about it and help them. So, anyone has anything else?
Let me ask this, the proposed ordinance that was created, was that originated through planning or originated with staff, reviewed by planning?
It was originated with staff, and we reviewed it, and then we voted and it came to you.
Okay.
Of course, there was probably some modifications I think that have been made
Yeah.
since.
Yeah.
Were they modifications dealing with the type of regulation, or more generally, should they be recognized and should we?
I think some of both.
Okay.
And a lot of us felt that option number 3 was an important one. Yes, but with some regulations there to help our citizens.
Was it unanimous?
Yes.
Yeah, it was.
Okay. That's good to know. Thank you. Tina, did you have something?
Well, I just wanted to clarify something, and I don't know if it's here nor there at this point in the discussion. But for the apartments, the accessory apartments that were established between 1963 and 1985, those would qualify for the opportunity to be granted a non-conforming use status. But they would have to, establish proof that they were legally established during that time period and that they complied with any regulations that were applicable at the time period. But they could, if any homeowner has an apartment, accessory apartment that they feel falls into that time period, they could come in and get a zoning verification and get granted the non-conforming use status. So those apartments would be off the table in terms of, are they legal or are they not legal? They would have that legality established, and they wouldn't have to worry about whatever we're doing.
So they're not in question.
Right, and I don't want to say they're blanketly grandfathered in, because the legal standard is that they were legally established at the time they were permitted, and we're not sure that all of them were.
So those that were legally established, they're not in question.
Right, they were
And that was between when and when?
1963 and 1985.
That kind of covers pretty much almost
If
everything.
you have really old homes that have those apartments, you have to prove that you actually used it as an accessory apartment during those years. Not that the home is that old, but you didn't start using it until 1990 as an accessory apartment. So there's some evidentiary issues that go into getting the non-conforming use established.
Yeah, I was curious if we had to, if they would have to establish some usage in the intervening years also, like a continuous use from then to now, and if we are aware of any that fall into that category, are there any apartments that we know of that were established during that window?
I'm not aware of any. To my knowledge, no one's come in and asked to have that designation.
So we probably have to go back and do something formal.
I think in many cases that might be challenging, if not impossible, because there's going to be a lot of homeowners that owned their home at that time who are no longer the homeowners. So to find that information, I'm not sure, you know, and our city building permit records, we have on a couple of occasions gone through the records just to find the permitting of an accessory apartment that would have happened in that time. And that's very, very challenging because we've got books where it was handwritten and it wasn't always real specific as to what the permit was for, you know, so we've had to guess sometimes on that, but it's very challenging to find city records that go back that far. So for a property owner today to be able to supply that kind of evidence, it's going to be difficult, if not impossible.
So who's the
Sometimes the county will have it on record too. That it was-
Recorded with the plat
that it
or
was
with the,
built as a single family with an accessory apartment, or they'll have a 2-family dwelling or something. So
I remember during my last term, we actually signed some that specifically restricted that extra kitchen from being used as an accessory apartment.
Right.
Grandmother thing was okay, or whatever you call it.
Mother-in-law.
Family thing, but not for rental. I'm sorry, Cindy.
No, I was just gonna say, is the ownership gonna be on the property owner to prove that, or I just think of that's a nightmare.
Well, it depends if we go in and try to regulate, right? If we don't regulate, then I don't know that the question is as difficult.
No, exactly.
Any other discussion, anything from planning?
Yeah, maybe Ken can address maybe some of our neighboring cities and what process they took briefly.
Okay, yeah, we have identified what cities currently have or permit accessory apartments. And so within the Utah County area, we surveyed 16 cities and 11 out of those currently permit accessory apartments. 5 currently do not. And one of them does not regulate, but the others do.
Who
So
does not regulate?
Santa Quin.
It's just a free for all, basically.
Yeah.
Like here.
But they're as far as their types of regulations or what type of ordinances they have, there seems to be a lot of common ground as far as requiring owner occupancy, looking at parking, you know, a few of those things. But as far as, you know, further regulation, that can vary quite a bit from city to city.
In reviewing it with the committee that was established and the planning commission has had a chance to look at it, did you come up with some regulations that other cities are doing that you would like to bring over to our city, or that you feel comfortable with, or that is working for them?
Right. So let me tell you, when I even before I started with the city, I was on a committee when I was working for JUB Engineers, and I was on the committee with Cindy when she was on the planning commission. That was back in 2002, I think it was, when we were reviewing it at that time. And
I wasn't involved in 1951.
so, but at that time, there was a bit of research as to what are the types of regulations we should have. And when I've looked through the ordinances that have come since, a lot of that has carried through. And so it's like, okay, here's a good foundation. Should we use this as a template? And so that's kind of gone through. So even today, the most recent version has a lot that was proposed back then. But there's been review, some changes, some different proposals. So the most recent committee used the more recent, I think it was the 2011 ordinance version, which had a lot of the older components to it, took that and reviewed it, made a few proposed changes, and then brought that forward. So it's kind of been a process in developing that.
So the first step we would be dealing with is deciding to recognize them. And then if we did, then we need to choose one of the other two, which is no regulation or regulation. Each one of those would create a different kind of an ordinance and then some additional work involved in, depending on the outcome of that decision, how we approach regulation.
So again, I think my recommendation would be to not get caught up on what some regulations means. That if some people are going to say, well, you have to tell me what the regulations are before I'm going to tell you yes or no. Well, that's not the answer we want.
Right.
We want, is it permissible at all in any circumstance? Then if so, with regulations or not. And let's just hold on what the regulations means. We'll work through that.
I mean, the only thing is I've heard from some residents who said, well, I'm for them if there's off the street parking, occupied, if it's this and this and this. That's something is they'd be willing to say yes if there was, and this is usually neighbors and people who have an accessory apartment, they'd be willing to say yes if those regulations were put in place. So that's what makes it kind of difficult, but I see what you're saying.
I think that's where we've gotten caught up and bungled in whether we're going to go forward or not, because we can't agree up front with, are we going to permit them? We mix that with, how are we going to regulate them? And we can't agree on all the regulations, and we get frustrated and we throw it to the side. So that's why I say, let's just get the permit them or not question out of the way, and then move forward on how to regulate.
I think that's right. My experience has been that we've entertained, and then we get caught up in the detail and throw it out. Time passes and we're done. So, let me ask the council, if we were to give direction to staff tonight on this subject, would you be comfortable moving forward for us to prepare some kind of an ordinance that permitted accessory apartments?
Unless it's just blurred.
Yeah.
Yes, with regulation.
So generally speaking, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, my concern's always been the financial, enforcement of it into the city, to the older seniors that need help, and what kind of hoops that they would have to jump through. And that's always been my concern, is the senior people that need it. And then if we write so many regulations on them that they can no longer afford to do it, but they need that to help them financially for their own, then that's a concern I have.
So that would get into the regulations and
Right, but
things.
how much is that going to, how much are we gonna regulate it, and how much is the financial obligation is that going to be?
How much regulation is too much regulation?
Yeah.
That can have a negative
It's too
impact
much of
on.
a financial
And
regulation,
how much
is what I'm concerned. And whether we can divide that up from new structures to older structures to the ones that have been here forever. I don't know how we can make that a win-win for those that need it without forcing them into too much of a financial burden to meet the needs.
Probably is going to come back to this whole concept of what is it that we're trying to regulate? You know, if it's just health, safety, and welfare, right? Versus something else.
And are we opening a Pandora's box?
So I think the planning commission, you guys were unanimous, recognize them with some form of regulation. I think I saw the same or heard the same comment from all of the council here, that we would recognize them and then work on what kind of regulation would need to happen. That's what I think I'm hearing. Maybe am I not hearing that? Okay, so that being the case, I think we're just gonna, I'm sorry, did you have a comment?
Well, I'd like to raise a couple issues.
Sure.
in reading some of the material, there seemed to be a revenue portion, and I'm not sure whether I agree with doing it for revenue's sake, but some of it listed lost revenues of $1 million a year.
To the city,
Yeah,
because of enforcement,
No,
no.
or,
If we were to permit them and charge a permit fee.
Not
No,
only,
no, that's not what he's.
no,
No,
not only that, but there's also,
We did-
they also included utility fees. I'm kind of wondering, is this all gonna be under the utility fee under one
So,
unit?
so we can answer that question.
Okay,
That's not what we're gonna discuss tonight.
okay, well, something to
It's the-
consider. And
Yes,
also,
absolutely.
they were also talking about a population increase due to the accessory apartments, which is real, it could happen. And if we do have a population increase, how is that gonna affect the infrastructure?
Correct.
so Jay, can you go back to $1 million, where's the $1 million thing, like what's that in reference to?
They were talking about utility fees charged not only to the house, but also to the accessory apartment.
But
So
that,
you
is that if you have a
got
separate
water, you
meter?
got,
okay, so that's on page of 03, it's page 2 of 10.
they were talking about impact fees,
So they're saying that an assumed population of 24,000 people
permit fees.
3.5 people per home.
So, I mean, I don't know that I agree with that, but it's,
And
and I don't
So
think
they're
it's the
saying-
revenue side that I'm concerned with as much as the demand on the infrastructure.
So they're just saying the lost monthly income of water of $30 a month, garbage $9.21, sewer $10 a month, which equals $49 per home. That averages out to $600,000 per year. And that's if you only had 1,000 accessory apartments. So if you have a separate utility in a different name, and they have their own trash can and their own, they're paying their water bill separately, but under the occupied owner's name, then we would, just with 1,000 apartments, that would be $600,000 a year.
There's also a licensing fee, renewal fee. Their proposal
And
was
that's
every 3 years.
Yes,
That's in that number.
right,
Diana.
but not the $600,000
No.
number.
So to keep us a little bit focused on the paths that we've been asked to look at, I think the first step that we needed to discuss, which we did, and everyone kind of agreed to, is the direction from the council to staff would be, we want to move forward on officially recognizing accessory apartments. And the discussion on all of these particular details about pricing and licensing and cars and traffic and people and relationships or whatever that is, that's to be determined. Probably each piece of that needs to be brought forward and discussed and weighed and, measured, and make sure that there's something valid associated with that and kind of take it from there. Would you guys agree with that? You okay with that, Jay?
I would, but I was bringing up the infrastructure because if it overtaxes the infrastructure, we have a major problem.
But it's already doing it right now. I mean, it's already,
It's totally different.
For the,
They're already living there.
yes. But now we're promoting it.
not necessarily promoting it, but just giving people more of a clear direction as to
So
if we allow
will
it.
it not increase?
I don't necessarily think so.
I think every home will be built with a.
Because people right now are having accessory apartments, whether or not it's legal. And so just by saying it's, I just don't, it might a little bit, but I don't think to this point, because, and also in the packet, it went back to, so you have a parking with a big family and utilities for a big family, how is that any different than people living in an accessory apartment? You could say that is the same, right, and that was in the packet
With
as
a new
well.
home, with accessory apartments allowed, will they increase the size of the home for the accessory apartment? Absolutely, they will.
Not if they can't afford, I mean,
I will, because I'm not gonna get a double rent, a double.
Yeah.
I think your argument's valid. but it probably should be discussed under the category of regulations. That's my suggestion would be, that's a valid concern. That should be part of the discussion on what are the regulations that we would consider and why.
As long as we consider it.
Okay.
I think Jay's broader point is that if there's a significant amount of infrastructural impact, we may speak to the fundamental question of whether or not we should permit them. And it could, the scenario could arise where we authorize them, but then to recover, to pay for our infrastructural impacts, we have to charge such a rate that they are never actually implemented, even though we allow them. I think it's a realistic scenario to consider. So I think it's a valid and valuable point.
Absolutely. Scott, did you have a comment? I saw
Yeah,
Tina's
I
hand
just-
as well.
I mean, we don't have to solve that problem tonight. I think that's probably going to require a study and somebody with some expertise to take a look at that and give us a recommendation. But I think for tonight, one of the things we need, the feedback from the council is, at what point do we bring the public into the discussion? So we have already a model ordinance that's been worked on by a committee just last year that's been approved by the Planning Commission. That gives us a basis that we can now send that out to the public and get feedback from the public on what that model ordinance is. Or we can take that model ordinance, bring it to the city council. We can get all the issues on the table that we need to research: infrastructure, are we going to have a permitting fee, are we going to, however we're going to handle that. When we had our retreat, the thing that was asked was, do we, before we even create a model ordinance, do we need to go to the public first and ask yes or no? Because we've done the surveys, but do we have a public hearing, or do we have an open house where we have some of this information available and get feedback from the public to say, even yes or no? Because if the answer is no from the public, then we don't need to really waste our time putting together the big model ordinance.
But short of a vote, Scott, what I'm hearing is there have been 3 questionnaires in 3 different time periods. Although I don't know, except for the 2,000 something responses, you would say that they're statistically significant for the number of households that would respond. But in all cases, there was a 73-to-1 response that said yes, recognize accessory apartments. I thought that's what you were representing.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
So short of a vote where we actually put it in front of all voters and something like 5,000, 6,000 people show up and give us their opinion, I don't know that we're going to get anything different. We would need to go beyond a simple survey and actually get everyone's opinion. And I don't know at this point if that's, I'm going to ask the council and defer. I don't know that that's what we need.
So
to
let me
do.
follow up on that.
Sure.
I agree with what you're saying. So if we all feel comfortable that we have enough information that the no response is not valid amongst our citizens, then right now, if we are looking at the model ordinance and some sort of regulation, how far do you want to go as a council tweaking this before we bring the public in? Do we want to show that in front of you, have you take a look and say, okay, now let's get public input on this? Or do you want to go further with it and have some work sessions so you feel comfortable with where it's at, and then we present that to the public?
So I guess the question for the council is, if we're in agreement, and we're going to tell staff to go ahead now and prepare a model ordinance, would we like the staff and the committee to start piecing together these individual issues that are going to come up, like the one Jay brought up, or parking, or separate utilities, looking for health, safety, and welfare, separate access, parking, whatever, and bring that forward and then have the discussion? Or do we want to try to do that at the council level? My thought would be, it would be a lot easier if there were many minds working on that in a committee and then bringing it back so that we could review it, as opposed to trying to come up with that in this meeting, which is the only meeting we're allowed to have.
I just wonder too, Mayor, with that though, should we be telling the committee and the group that's going over this some of our concerns and address them as they're meeting, and Dave's concern, my
Sure.
concern? those concerns that we have, so that as they're putting this together, they're addressing some of those concerns along the way.
Yeah.
How
I
about,
think there's a couple of ways to do that. We can try to come up with them sitting here, or we can just email staff and then let them go ahead and take that into that group. As you think about new concerns, send them in. I think that a lot of the concerns that I've heard right now are contained in the 45, 50, 60 megabytes of data. Because, you know, we've been through this a couple times. So I think it's okay to proceed that way. Yeah.
I'm wondering if it would be beneficial before we start just saying, okay, committee, do something, and we come back and you're all, you know, that's not what I thought or wanted or whatever.
Because we've never done
What if we have another meeting of the council where we just kind of review a list of all the issues that we've thought of and say, do you think this is an important issue we need to discuss? There might be some there you go, that's a no-brainer. Yeah, for sure. There's others that, no, we don't need to worry about that. So we can refine our list a little bit before we send it to committee.
I like that idea because, yeah, like you said, I wouldn't want you spending time on, you know, a great length of time on a certain issue when we're, you know, not a big deal or something, you know.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
You guys?
And then that hopefully gives you more direction on really what to focus on.
Yeah,
instead
it
of just
would.
having a list of 30 things that hopefully is what we want, you know, so.
Right.
I like that idea.
Shall we start by giving our feedback to Ken so he can kind of pull it together and then bring it back into this meeting? So
Yeah.
we're not coming up with
So if there are particular issues of regulation you want to make sure that, you know, you have a concern about, that we bring that forward, then, you know, email me. And at our next work, I don't know.
Has
When
planning commission discussed some of those things?
Yes, you to me. But
The regular issues. or
And we did
regulations?
review, like, City of Warren recently went through this 2 or 3 years ago, and it really, they didn't have as big an impact as they thought it was. So.
But have you guys discussed that other than what was presented to you? Have you gone into it a little bit further than just what was presented, or where's your discussion level?
You're talking like concerns?
Yeah,
No, we could address it more.
okay.
And then-
So you've had no concerns with it?
It
You
seems
were
like-
happy for what was printed to be passed today?
I think it would be appropriate to, if you're in agreement that it would be appropriate to have the planning commission be the committee or the review of these issues to bring back again to the city council. Now, they have already reviewed several of those in the format of the ordinance that they've looked at, but there could be other, there are other issues that they could discuss.
Mayor. Yeah, I think, you know, we talked about a lot of things in general, you know, but we get down to the specifics that you're talking about right now. I think we can address that a lot further, and what the impacts are on each one of those things as it affects our community and property value, you know, property, you know, ownership and things like that as well. Some of the issues that came up with that.
Is the council comfortable with delegating that initial approach to the planning commission? Having them surface those concerns, we can look at that together, make sure it contains the concerns that we're interested in, and then go down the path of research on the ones that we actually want to address. You guys all right with that?
Yeah,
So-
definitely.
So we send those to maybe Ken and Eric, or?
I think we can send them all to Ken
Okay.
and Derek, or just Ken,
Okay.
either one, and they'll get them.
Yeah.
And they're already, from those surveys, Mayor, like you talked about, they're already at like a top 15 type of concerns that
Yeah.
we can
Go
go
through
through.
it, yeah, that was good.
Well, that and with as much data as was compiled here, a lot of our concerns, I think, have been discussed multiple times. So it's not like we're the first people on the committees to have thought of these concerns.
Mayor, I think it's good that the council identifies what issues are important to them, so we don't waste our time and not address issues that we think are what you want, but maybe they're not there, but we identify those issues so we can, you know, streamline it.
Sure.
So that's where I would recommend, why don't you let me put together a list and present it to the council? And let's just say, okay, let's go through that list and chop out some of them. And then whatever your list is, we send it to the planning commission.
And if there's, and in the meantime, we can still send you
Oh, yeah,
specific
absolutely.
items that we might want to make sure. that
Absolutely.
address individually. Okay. Any
I don't
other?
want, sorry, I'm just gonna go one more step. So at what stage do we determine what the financial obligation from the city's gonna be, once we approve these?
When you
So
say,
that
what
also-
does that mean?
Well, I just think the regulation, who's gonna go out and do, check on them.
I think that
We
should
have
be
to have
part
it,
of our-
course, so I think the financial obligation from the city's gotta be in that discussion.
I would agree, and I think that what we need to do is after we've come up with those lists of concerns, then we have a fine staff of people that all look at each one of those things and they can bring back, okay, like police, for example, can let us know what the impact from a police perspective would be. Public Works, same thing.
Utilities, everything, how this is
We get
gonna
that
affect us as a
information
city.
and then you take a look at enforcement versus regulation and say, is it still worth the
Yeah.
cost of regulating that item? You know?
So, and Eric, I'm interested to see what Orem did too. What you were saying 3 or 4 years ago. I'm interested in that data from Orem.
We can get.
Yeah.
We can get all of that information out.
Okay,
We can
perfect.
talk to them now.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else from the council? Tina,
It's okay.
Planning Commission?
Mayor, also, just, I know we've gone, as we've discussed today, this has gone on for decades. Is there a time frame that maybe we set, whether it be 2 months or 3 months from now or whatever else that we?
If we were to have our next normal Planning Commission meeting, joint meeting, when would that be?
In 3 months.
In 3 months? Is that sufficient time?
Yeah.
Too much
Should be.
time?
No, it's
About right? Okay. Why don't we say during our next official meeting, that's the time for us to come together and review that.
So, and I'm proposing in 2 weeks, I come back with this list for you to review.
That sounds good. That gives them plenty of time to work on a more concise list. Jay, you all right?
Yes.
All right, anybody else? Okay, so the direction to staff is to proceed in, we're going to move forward with accessory apartments. And we'd like you to, Ken, prepare a list of those things that we would want to make sure are covered in at least in discussion format about regulations. We will also, the council will pass to you any specific concerns they have, whether they're duplicated or not. You'll come back in 2 weeks with that, and then we will whittle that down and turn it over to Planning Commission as a working committee. They'll chew over it for the next 3 months and bring it back during our next meeting.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Do you feel that? It's progress.
If we just take a minute and just go in them.
We'll take 10 seconds of silence. That's too long.
Like you're like.
Okay, number 7, discussion on franchise fee for city utilities, revenue proposal to comply with state auditing requirements.
I
Oh,
think
there you
I
are, Dean.
cover that for a
Sorry.
second here. We talked about this a few weeks ago, about the requirement that we have now that we're going to need to have the general fund pay our utility funds for the utilities it uses. And we haven't done that in the past. The state auditor's office, and anyways, I think there's an emphasis on trying to have arm's length transactions between the two, between our general fund and our utility fund. So that's one thing we need to do. What this franchise fee would do would be an attempt to say, if we have any utilities that we have in the city that aren't city utilities, like Questar Gas or Rocky Mountain Power or Comcast, we charge them a franchise fee right now. In other words, they pay that fee to the city for the ability to use the city's right of way. So what we're proposing with this is to charge a similar fee. It would be a lower amount that the general fund would charge to the city utilities, really for the same type of a thing. Now, the fees that are charged to Rocky Mountain Power and Questar Gas and Comcast are 5 or 6%. This fee would be less than that. And remember, we talked about last time exactly how we want to do that, because what we're really trying to do, all we're trying to do, in fact, that's why it says on here, revenue neutral proposal, is we're just trying to say the funds that we have in the general fund now, we really want to stay in the we need that money for the general fund. The funds are in utilities, we need there. There's not an attempt to transfer money back and forth between the two. So we really just want to have the franchise fee essentially equal what the amount of the utilities would be, which is an amount that's going to vary a little bit. So I've looked into a few things, and Tina's looked into a few things. What this franchise fee would say is we would charge up to 3%, so it would be a maximum of 3%, but we would charge less than that if it's less than that. The actual fee will probably only be 1.5% to 2%. The amount we're estimating on utility usage, we talked about that a little bit, I think, last week, about getting meters on city facilities and stuff like that. So right now we're just going off of estimates, but so that's why we probably need a little bit of a leeway, and also in the fact that it's going to change a little bit year to year. So the proposal would be to have a franchise fee that would be up to 3%, but the actual amount of the fee would be the amount that's equal to the amount of utilities used by the general fund.
So, question, are we saying that the way to establish the correct amount is going to be the meter the utilities being used by each part of the city?
Sure.
And figure out what that costs?
Yeah, and some of the utilities are based on, if it's a storm drain fee, it's not based on a meter, it's based on impervious area, and secondary water fees are based on the land size, so some of those aren't really metered, but sewer and water, the only way to really know what the amount is would be to meter it.
I'm kind of confused on this. You say it's revenue neutral. Yet you say right now there's funds coming from the general fund that will no longer be taken from the general fund, which would come from the enterprise fund.
So right now, the amount.
And if that's the case, wouldn't it increase the enterprise or require additional revenues on the enterprise funds to replace that money that's coming from the general fund?
Yeah, so if I understand your question right now, so the utility funds would recognize a revenue from the general fund for its use of utilities. So that's essentially money going from general fund to the utility funds. This fee would transfer is the wrong word, but this fee would charge a fee to those utility funds in the same amount that would go back to the general fund.
You want it to end up in the general fund?
Well, we want it to stay this. We want the revenues that are in the general fund now to be the same as they are after we do this.
But is it going to show at?
Well, no, I guess if you're not taking it from the general fund, the money has to come from somewhere.
So
For the utility fee?
Yes.
Yeah, we are taking it from the general fund, though.
This is what Dean explained to me when we met about this. The state auditor is no longer happy with the fact that utilities used by a city are not reported somewhere. And we also have the ability as a city to charge a utility for administrative fees because the city administrates those fees. So the administration cost is currently in the general fund. The utility fee is currently in utilities. We're going to make those two numbers equal and show it on the books like this. So there'll be no change in the amount of money that are in both funds. There'll be a fee on this side to the general fund for the amount of utilities used, and a fee to the utility on this side for the amount of overhead that the city provides to manage that utility. So there's the revenue neutral.
I just want to make sure we're not intending to raise the enterprise revenues.
No, and I should emphasize, there's no effect on rates, anything that we're doing here. There's no effect on utility rates.
So
I just want that clear.
Yep.
Everyone here, everyone there.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with utility rates. Yeah, I mean, the rates won't be affected by this. So we just wanted to kind of explain it that way to you. We need to have a public hearing on this, which we would schedule for April 14th. And
I'm seeing in here a model ordinance or a draft ordinance.
yeah,
right?
Tina's drafted that.
Is that the one you?
Yes, I drafted that. The question for the council is, is this how you want to handle the process? Because as Dean explained before, we could do it another way, but it's a little more cumbersome in terms of sending out a notice every year to our ratepayers that we're making that transfer from one fund to the other. So I just wanted to make sure that you're comfortable with this mechanism for complying with the auditor's requirements, and that you're comfortable with the language of the ordinance where it says up to 3%, because at this point, we're not able to say with certainty what it's going to be.
And it will vary a
Other
little bit
cities
year to
have
year.
charged just a flat 6%, 5%, 4%. And we're trying to build a little, flexibility in there because we don't want to charge more than what it actually costs. Does that make sense?
Yeah. In both directions.
Yeah.
Everybody okay with that?
Because we discussed that a few months ago and decided that it was gonna be very, very confusing and since everything is.
Well, and there's a cost too, because we have to
There's a
send out a
cost to
mailer
send
and
out
stuff. So,
yeah.
and we have to do it every year. This is a way to just handle it one time. But yeah, we need to have a public hearing, and that would be on April 14th. And if, depending
So
on how
the
that goes,
answer
we
is
could
yes,
adopt
we're
it that day.
comfortable with this method.
Okay.
Let's put it on the next.
It would be on the
appropriate
14th.
agenda.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, we are at number 8. It's 4 minutes to 7. I'm not aware of a BYU game tonight.
We stay here till midnight, Mayor.
Not me. Neighborhood and staff business. Anything tonight?
No.
No? Okay. I'm gonna just go in the order I can see people. Lynn, anything?
Got the water rented that
Okay.
you approved, and contracts ready for you to sign and everything's done.
Okay. Thank you.
Scott has
Anything else? Okay. Dean, anything else? Dion? Ken? Okay.
Okay, a few things. I just wanted to mention, I noted that we have all 9 of the Planning Commission members here tonight. I think that is a historic moment. Also, having all the council with all the Planning Commission, that's a rare thing.
We actually discussed. All right. And we actually discussed planning commission.
That's right. That's right. Okay, and I mentioned in the accessory apartments discussion that I'd come back in 2 weeks. I think in 2 weeks, we're not having a meeting. Is that correct? That would be April 7th.
So April 7th we canceled, so we're
Right.
probably.
So in 3 weeks, we'll come back. I wanted to take the opportunity because often we have letters of commendation to our heroes of those who do so well in our emergency services, and lots of letters and pats on the back, and aren't they great for doing their job? So I wanted to share a letter that we got for a couple of the employees that I have in my department who are doing their job, doing it very well. To whom it may concern, March 2002, I began construction on a home in Timp Estates, acting as my own general contractor. It was one of the more fun things I had done in quite some time. It was far more enjoyable due to the personnel at the city office in Pleasant Grove. There was always 2 smiling, blue-eyed ladies at the front office to greet me. It was always uplifting to see them each time I went to their office. Particularly, Linda would always smile and ask what she could do for me. She would direct me most generally to Barbara for some answers I would ask. Barbara scheduled my inspections and construction went along. She did that with particular expedience. She must have had a whip hanging on the wall somewhere that Dave knew what it meant. Dave was very cordial as well as most thorough with the inspections. This was especially important to me since this was the first experience to general my own home. He made sure everything was done as it should be. A couple of my subs had to make corrections. I think it turned out to be a job well done. Overall, because of the friendliness and promptness of the 2 blue-eyed ladies in the front office, it made my experience exceptionally a good one. They serve the public very well. I can't believe it has been 13 years since, but I look to build once more, perhaps. It will turn out I will be bugging them again, and I look forward to doing so. 3 cheers to all. Donald E. Day, Jr.
2002?
Since 2002, but this letter came just recent.
Okay, great. Anything else, Ken?
So they've been nice for that many years.
Okay, Dave, anything? Okay. Amy, right? Okay,
I don't have
nothing.
anything.
Dave,
Nothing.
okay. Sherry?
Yes.
Sherry,
yes.
Let's hear it, Sherry. Announce it.
I applied for a grant with it's called a community development block grant. It's a federal grant administered through a group in Utah County, and for an elevator, to have them pay for an elevator. And we found out on Thursday that we got a grant for $140,000 for the elevator. And on a much smaller scale, we're doing our Panda Express fundraiser. So anybody who's interested, pick one of these up from me, and go to Panda on Friday, and 20% of your purchase will go toward the library. Thank you.
Okay, is it Luke? Levi, sorry.
Nothing further from me.
Nothing? Okay. Tina? I was gonna say
Good.
Christine.
Christine's good too.
Anything? Okay. Carl?
Nothing.
Nothing? Scott?
We actually do need to review next week's agenda. We have 6 public hearings, and we want to make sure the council is up to date on what's going on before we have those. So that is not on our agenda, but and it's
Well,
great.
if it is not on the agenda.
It wasn't approved.
We're willing to.
It wasn't added when we asked for that. Okay,
So
we'll get to that.
Yeah,
right.
as soon as we do the reports, we can take a minute to over those.
Lisa?
Good, thank you.
Eric?
Good.
Scott? Drawing a blank, sorry. Drew? Anything? Gary? Okay. Kathy? Did I mistake? Sorry.
Gallon.
Hey,
Gallon?
Down.
Okay. Jay? Diana?
Yes.
I only have 6 kids. Their numbers 1 through 6. You're out of line.
Same. First of all, do we want to ride together or separately for the Strawberry Days parade? This is something I need to get back with Lisa.
What do you folks want to do? Do you want to ride individually or all on the back of a tractor or?
Well, let's not say tractor. I mean, there's like a limo that we pop out, and I kind of wanted a Harley this year, but is that possible?
I was actually thinking that we should dress up in overalls and follow a Cooper Scooper. City council on the
yeah,
back.
well,
No?
Do you have anything else? that you wanna
Yes,
add?
I do actually.
I don't mind anything.
I think it's good how it's worked in the past,
So just separate cars with your
Whatever
spouse.
you did.
Okay.
or family.
And this is involving Ken. I had someone call and Aroma Tools has a reception center on their top level, and they're going to have their ribbon cutting. And they were thinking they might like to open that up for wedding receptions, which is not a permitted use. So
So we've been in conversation with them, and they have actually submitted an application to amend the code to allow that as a permitted or conditional use in the zone. There is a category, they have already planned 1 reception on their top floor. We mentioned to them if they were going to use that room occasionally or infrequently for special events, if they're somewhat related to the business itself, that they would be okay. But if they're going to start getting into a regular wedding reception type thing, they would have to seek an amendment to the code. So they have applied for that. There is this first reception that they've already planned. There is a conditional use that is in the zone right now that allows for some special events. So we're going to categorize this first reception as a special event to allow them to move forward on that one, and then anything further would have to follow.
Is there any negatives to doing that? I mean, is it a good place to do it? Good zone?
I think the main concern we have with that is parking, because receptions can potentially bring in a lot of vehicles. They have the ability to add more parking than what they currently have, so we're gonna have to look at that. That's one thing that we might have an issue, but
They are a right in, right out only, aren't
on
Yes.
No, wait, well, coming out, if they
coming
come out all
on
the
the
way.
south end, it would be a left.
They have a full
You
group
cross.
movement. Yeah, because you go straight across to
To the holiday.
holiday.
Yeah. So they have an access on that south end, that's straight across.
So that access lines up with
It does.
the street.
Uh-huh.
Then they have another. That's divided.
Do they, what is parking, did somebody bring that up?
Yeah.
Parking's okay for?
Well, the
I mean,
parking
reception
was not
center, you
planned
can
for a
have
reception
500
center,
people.
so they may, after we look at it, we're gonna have to determine whether they need
But what if they do? Where do they
more.
go?
Well, they own that full piece. That's, half of it's developed and half of it's not, although they've got the other half on the market. But ultimately, since they're trying to do this, they may have to take a piece of that if we determine that they need this.
Or do you share parking if it's gonna be a business during the day
Yeah, we can look
and
at that.
reception? And the only other question I have is, House Bill road tax. Do we have any idea?
We don't have that information yet. They're gonna rebuild that all at the Utah League Conference down in St. George, which is in 2 weeks. So they said at that point, they'll be able to pinpoint what each city could possibly generate. Of course, that's contingent on the county putting it on the ballot and the ballot being voted, the tax being voted.
Anything else?
No, sorry.
Thanks.
I wanted to compliment Carl and ask him a quick question. I know our chief is down in St. George, but you guys handled a difficult thing on Friday, and it was impressive to see that it was done so well. We appreciate that. I was curious what your thoughts are on it was the first time I think we've employed our reverse 911, our newest technology there. And I was hoping you could maybe give us some sense of whether you're satisfied with how that rolled out, or.
I haven't heard how that went on that. I can get back with you and see how that went, but I haven't heard any negative or anything positive, so.
Okay.
We have a couple things we do need to tweak. We found out using the Everbridge system that we had a couple kind of communication issues with that. So we're gonna sit down and kind of work through those. We also want to make it so that the council receives a real-time. If we're notifying the public of anything, you guys will be notified as well in case you get phone calls, that you'll have all the real-time information, because you were getting it kind of secondhand from me, from them. So we want to cut me out of the loop and just, the system is capable of doing that.
Was on my phone first.
Daily Herald called you.
Well,
So,
not called, so that was, I have just a little, like breaking news.
Uh-huh.
That was actually first.
oh, yeah, and so we want to make sure you find out from us before you do the newspaper, so. We're great then.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Carl. Nice job again. Thank you.
Thanks.
Anything else, Ben?
That's it.
Sid?
I mean, just follow up on that. Carl, sorry, I have
Oh.
so you guys, have you already done a debriefing on it, did you say, on the Everbridge? On the
No, we
incident
haven't done
last
that
week?
yet.
You haven't yet, okay. Because if I can send you some of the comments that I received from the public about
Yeah,
that, and just
or if you want
questions,
to send them to Heidi,
send them to Heidi.
I think.
Okay.
Heidi or Sherry.
You can send it
Okay.
to me, Sid. we already have a time set up. Me and Mike and
Okay,
Terry.
and then just any questions that we have, we can send to you as
Yep.
well. Okay,
Yep,
want to
we'll
make sure
take
I
care of that.
understand, so I can let the public. Okay, Scott, a question, the tennis courts at Battle Creek,
Mhm.
they've been locked, and I was under the impression that public would be able to use them, but have they just been locked because construction isn't technically done, like around the courts, or? Because I was under the impression the public would be able to use those.
Yeah, they have told us that they would be open, so if they are locked, it could be that, but I don't know that for sure. I can
Okay.
contact them and ask why
All
they're
right, can
locked.
you explain that?
Yep.
Okay. And then sidewalks. I've had a lot of people ask me about sidewalks, and I'm just curious as to, I know we have a small budget for sidewalks. Not sure how much that budget is, but how do we prioritize what sidewalks get done in the city? And if there's a problem, is it based on traffic and usage or schools? How do we prioritize how sidewalks get reconstructed or built, or how is that determined?
I think Lynn might be able to ask.
Report by phone, when people think they would like to get involved in doing part of that sidewalk. That's what it's set up.
What if it's a city owned?
If it's a city-owned, completely city-owned,
Mhm.
then we decide this we can handle the budget. So we have to spread that budget out amongst the city and the citizenry the same.
But is there like a priority, like a school area
Oh,
needs to,
sure,
you know, would get higher
absolutely.
priority?
And priority also on the danger, health and welfare of the city. If you've got somebody that trips,
Right. the
you
liability
immediately
of the
go take care of that.
Okay.
So when you say city-owned sidewalk, what are you referring to?
Yeah,
Well, okay. The resident, when they build their home, are required to put in their curb and gutter,
Mhm.
correct?
And sidewalk.
And sidewalk.
and
sidewalk.
sidewalk.
So I'm referring to more of the, not that,
Okay,
not the
so-
residential sidewalk.
Okay.
Just, so if there's a sidewalk by a school that's not complete, who's responsible for that?
Well, if it's the school district's property, it's probably the school that's
Okay, what if it's not?
whose property
To
is
and
it?
from the school.
Ours. There's a
It's
portion
city-owned
that's ours,
property?
it's city-owned.
Then it's our responsibility.
Okay, so how do we determine when that gets fixed and with the priority list of sidewalks and
Yeah, to me,
is it
that's,
just specific, kind of a case by case thing or?
It is.
yeah, because the sidewalk budget we have is generally for kind of repair of sidewalk.
Okay,
So we have a broken sidewalk, that's usually what we use that money for. We don't technically have a budget for a new sidewalk. And most of the time it's developed, there's undeveloped property, there's an ownership, and when it gets developed, that's when the sidewalk goes in.
okay,
But if we have city-owned property that needs a sidewalk, if you can let us know specifically where you're getting the inquiries, we can take a look at that cost and put that in as a capital budget item.
so what about the sidewalk directly in front of somebody's home that's never been put in?
That's their responsibility.
That's their responsibility.
They're not required to do it unless they meet a threshold of improvements or expansion to their property. And once they pass that threshold, then the city requires the installment of those missing improvements. But if they're not gonna add to their house or do anything different to their property, it can remain without sidewalk forever unless the city comes in with the special assessment district and assesses each property that's going to.
But was that homes grandfathered in or is that new construction or both?
It's both.
Well, that'd be both, but normally what I was just referring to would be older homes that don't have a
Right.
sidewalk in front.
But do we require it from new construction? The
Yes,
sidewalk?
we do.
We do.
And on occasion, we've gotten grants or other, what is the other
Well, you had
grants
the
that we
safe
have?
routes to
Safe
school.
sidewalks to school and
Safe
such that a lot of sidewalks have been put in through that.
SR2S is what.
And
put
how,
it in
who
the
applies for those, Lynn? Is
The
who
school
applies?
district.
the
The school
applies?
district by law has to give you their route, safe route to school, their walking routes. They're to be turned into the state every year. If they haven't got that in and current, there's no such thing turning in, they just slap at them.
Jennifer's done it.
I know Jennifer has done one.
Yeah.
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 The application, last round of safe routes to school, the application was required to be signed by the city. Jennifer did all of the work, got it all ready for us. I don't remember if I signed it or Lynn signed it, but yeah, the request does come from the city under the current program.
Jennifer Baptista, 32 North, 1300 East. The last grant that we were awarded was the Grovecrest up 1100. That was the last grant offered. That was the end of the program. So it was through UDOT, and when the market crashed and UDOT took the hit, they eliminated that program. So there is no grant that I'm aware of that UDOT has done. There was talk about them possibly connecting and try to join with another type of funding resource, but that hasn't been made public that I'm aware of. But yeah, that was the last and final grant available.
So if a resident at this point has a specific area they feel is the city, whether or not it is, they should just call Public Works, is that right, Lynn? Okay, and then you can determine if that.
Yeah, me or
something
Dagan,
we need
either
to-
one.
Okay.
So we recently had a request from the community, and I looked at them, gave John Goodman some recommendations. And, John then looks at his budget. The budget that we have, we talk about a priority list. Really, the needs are so great out there that I don't know that a priority would help you. Because the priority, you would need to begin to address any one of the priorities that you could establish.
That's what I'm wondering, why we should have a priority list. I mean, is there a safety concern that's up here? Is there higher traffic? Is there
Sure.
kids walking to school? Is there a higher priority list than some of the others? That's what I'm wondering, if it would be beneficial to have a priority list.
Yeah, but it just depends on how they come in, Sid. You've got a priority list. You're missing $22 million worth of sidewalk in this city now. And where do you start? Where do you stop?
Another opportunity for us to tackle it as a council, just like roads and some of the sidewalks should be another one to address. Anything else? Okay, Cindy? Thanks for bringing those issues up. I think all of them are very valid and important. Okay, let's all of those things. Yeah, let's look at next week's agenda. So this is the meeting for the 31st. Looks like we'll have to consider for appointment the Strawberry Days chair and vice chair. There's going to be a change because our current chair has been, Bruce has been asked to serve a full-time mission. I guess he's been called to be a mission president. And
Whoa, baby. Well, that's exciting.
and so
He's in Arizona.
Reno, Sparks.
Who?
Reno, Sparks.
Oh, dear.
Cowboy.
Oh.
So the way that it's being handled is the current vice chair, which is Melissa Finch. She's accepted to step up as chair this year. And then she's brought in another co-chair, a husband-wife team. And I think we should get that information to the council so they.
Yeah, they've been out of town, so they haven't filled out their application yet. And the application will have kind of their bio.
Okay.
So as soon as I get that, I'll send it out to the council.
But they're already running 100 miles an hour.
They're already-
so-
They're already in and
very, very
we
good.
met with them. They're very excited. Melissa actually handpicked them. We feel very good about their qualifications and enthusiasm. Okay, presentations, none. Action items ready for vote, none. We have a number of public hearings. So we have item 10A, a public hearing to consider for adoption an ordinance 2015-8, adopting the water management conservation plan and providing for an effective date. Is that the one we reviewed?
Discussed
Okay.
last week.
Item 10B, is to consider for adoption an ordinance 2015-9, amending Pleasant Grove Municipal Code 10-11-C-2-D to allow caretaker quarters to occupy up to 10% of a building area occupied by a business where the business has operations, equipment, or the resources that require 24-hour oversight in the CS zone. Does that have something to do with like, oh, sorry, Ken, go ahead.
No, Mayor, I thought I'd go ahead and show a quick slide presentation on these items. This one and the next four are all ordinance amendments proposed by applicants.
Great.
It's not staff generated. Maybe Dave, you could hit that light there again. And I also, before I move into that, I think we overlooked the recognition of Royce Davies, our city planner, who is also here tonight. Royce was very instrumental in our most recent push on accessory apartments and assisted with the information generation on that. So I just wanted to make sure you recognized him.
Thank you, Royce. Did you have any business?
Okay. So this item is for the caretaker. Now, currently in the CG zone, which is in our central area of the swerve area of State Street, and then also in the MD, the manufacturing district, we allow caretakers to be a part of a business. And it's specific to a certain percentage of the size of the business. It has to have rear access and these type of things. They are permitted use in 2 of our zones. So on the CS zone, which is mostly along the southern State Street area, is where we have a potential business that would like to have a caretaker facility in the rear of the business. And so the applicant is requesting this. So the proposed regulations that we would have with that are in our other zones that allow it would be that it must be attached to the primary structure. 10% maximum of the primary structure could be allowed for the residential use. Inconspicuous in design, so it looks and feels still like a business. It's not a residence at that location. Located at the rear of the building. It may not be rented to some other person that's not associated with the business. And only if 24-hour surveillance is required. So that would be a guideline so that we just don't have any business that wants to come and do this just for fun. And then this residence is removed or no longer used as a residence if that business then leaves. Okay, so this is just the applicant's location. It's on State Street, and is that 820 north or south? I turned it. Yeah, so it's just right here that they would like to do a vehicle or a car sales business, and would like to use the rear of the home and perhaps add on just a little bit for a residence right there. So that is not what is in question tonight. I'm just throwing it up there as what the applicant is looking at. So.
Okay. Next one is ordinance 2015-10.
Was that the next one, or did I get out of order here?
Well, adopting ordinance 2015-10.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's right. So this is a request to conditionally allow reception centers and dance halls serving alcohol in the CS2 zone.
This is with alcohol, so it might be a little different.
Okay, it might be different than Footloose.
So
Yeah.
where is it?
So CS2 zone. So again, we have two areas of CS2. One is down around the Smith's Shopping Center, and then we have another one at Macy's. So there's a little bit of land available to the northwest of Macy's that is in the CS2 zone. There's land available by the Smith Shopping Center. The applicant is looking particularly at some space in the Smith Shopping Center near or next to the Los Compadres Mexican restaurant. And so the applicant has expressed a desire to do this for special events, family parties, receptions, quinceañeras. If you know what a quinceañera is, it's the Spanish or Mexican, it's a bar mitzvah, if you will, of the 15-year-old girls being recognized as coming out into the world and having a big party. So that is something that is big in that culture. They like to have a place to do that. They are doing that to some degree in Provo and other places, but they're struggling finding a place where permitting alcohol is also allowed. So that's what the request is. So the use numbers to be included in the code to allow for this would include 5821 dance halls serving alcoholic beverages, excluding hard liquors. 6399 other personal services, which includes a lot of different things, but towards the bottom you see receptions, wedding chapels. So those are the two things that we would need to add to the code to allow them to do what they're wanting to do.
Building a building or building a
Wanting to take existing space.
like that sports store at the end of that.
If you go back behind Little Caesars to the south and east, you've got the Mexican restaurant there. There are some open spaces. They would like to take those and turn it into this type of a dance hall situation.
Aspen Salon. As long as I can have a dance.
So this is the particular location right here on the map. So this is the Smith store right here, State Street. So it's this area outlined with the associated parking for that building. But the spaces they're looking at is in this area. So there are other undeveloped properties down and through here.
What is the alcoholic? I thought there was only so many alcoholic licenses you can have. Is that only pertaining to a restaurant, or is that pertaining to a dance hall?
Well, so there's different types of alcohol licenses. The state regulates the hard liquor, and there are a certain number of those that are
And those are
available
for
at the
restaurants.
state. what they're asking for is to be able to serve not hard liquor, wine, beers, that kind of stuff. And so those are normally regulated by the city, the state doesn't step in, so there's not a numerical cap on them.
So this is what, 3% or less kind of stuff?
Excuse me.
Any other questions on this one?
Just a couple things that we brought forward, and I won't read through it all right now, but this will be part of the presentation at the next meeting. What the current identity and vision statement is that supported the staff's recommendation for denial of this application. However, after discussion with the applicant and the Planning Commission, the result that came out of that is the Planning Commission is recommending approval. So we had some similar uses at the Lions Club over the years. They were not necessarily the same thing, although I think they may have tried to be, but as far as the alcohol situation, it was not permitted. But there were just some concerns that were brought up in with the use.
So do you think these are the same ones that can't use the Lion House anymore, or Lions Club anymore?
I don't know if it's the same people.
They can still use the Lions Club.
No, but we raised them.
But we changed our rates.
Extraordinarily.
I think just what we're trying to point out here, and this is the concern from staff with the alcohol, is this is something that where alcohol wasn't allowed in the Lions Club anyway. And we still had issues with alcohol. And so there's a concern to us whether we're going to possibly need more enforcement, police staff wise and things. So again, the staff looked at that, we're okay with the dance hall, it's the alcohol part that causes us concern. And I think what Ken was saying is when they came to the Planning Commission was okay with it.
With the alcohol?
Yes, so that's what they recommended, and they can, they're here, they can represent their discussion.
So the gentleman who's approaching us also provides his own security. He's got, that covered, and he goes and gets together with the chief to talk to him about the situation and make sure that it's going to be handled and covered properly.
Two things. I spoke with the gentleman at length about his plans, and he does not currently operate anything like what he wants to operate here. His current facility in Provo is a very successful business, but he does not serve alcohol there. And so his experiences in terms of what he does and how he handles it, he currently does not have a business that does what he wants to do here. So there's a little bit of a disconnect, I think, with what he presents with how he does business, because he doesn't do this yet. The other thing is the statistics that we have there are definitely not accurate. And I'm sure that's probably all they could find when they were searching the database, but it would really depend on how the officer listed the address of the scene, because Carl can tell you that he's been there on fighting and intox cases way more than 3 times and 3 times. It was a constant.
Mayor, if I can state, I think we may have to reflect back to the notes on the meeting itself, but I'm almost certain he said that there was alcohol in the program. People report.
That was how it was presented.
Yeah, I think it was presented to us that there was alcohol and that he worked closely with the Provo Police Department in what was going on, handling any complaints, any issues that the police saw that he would take care of with his planning and also with his security force. But that's kind of what was presented to us, so if he's didn't say to you that there was no alcohol in Provo, I think he misled us a little bit.
I asked him that question specifically, and he told me he did not serve alcohol.
I think what he and may not have been clear about is that he allowed alcohol to come in Provo.
So is this something that can come back before us? You guys can ask him to come back?
Well, I think there's 2 different things going on here, right? One is a specific discussion about a person who wants to do a business in an area. And the other is whether or not we want to approve an ordinance that allows a type of use in an area. So I think that if the planning commission had pushed this forward based on a specific applicant, maybe you need to revisit this based on the use of, an ordinance in the area. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, Mayor, it sounds like Tina says that these numbers are inaccurate, but I know I based my decision highly on the evidence we had here. And I looked at this and said 11 years, 1 DUI, that's very insignificant to me. That leads me to believe that there isn't a problem. I thought these numbers were very insignificant for the time period that was presented. I know that's what we're planning on, so maybe something where we would need to update the
Well, that and the concept again, that we're talking about an ordinance to permit a use in an area which is different than approving an application for a specific use. So if you feel like, you're making a recommendation that is more applicant-based than ordinance-based, you probably ought to take this back and revisit it.
When he comes next week, or when this is presented next week, the council can make his plea to the council. If the council wants to send it back to the planning commission after that, that's one of your options. If you want to just deal with him right then and there and say, okay, here's what we don't like about what you're saying, or here's what we do like. I mean, the council still has the authority just to make a decision on that.
Right. I think what I'm saying is that staff said no. Planning commission discussed it and said yes. Now that more information has been presented, planning commission is kind of wanting to take this back and revisit it. And we respect the planning commission with their recommendations. My suggestion right now is send it back and let them deal with it before it comes here. You guys all
I
right with
agree.
that?
I don't see why to bring him here and then.
Is that all right?
I'm just wondering, as far as procedurally, Tina, is that something that needs to be an agended item for the city council to send it back to the planning commission? The planning commission has already sent it forward. So in this informal discussion here, can it be determined specifically that it will be remanded to planning commission?
It's already on the agenda, and it's already been noticed as a public hearing, so it has to be done next week, if that's what you want to do.
Okay.
In the meeting next week.
All right. Sounds good.
So what? I didn't hear that.
We have to address it next week, and
Okay,
we
this
can
is on
send
the
it back at
agenda.
that time. Okay.
I want to add one more comment, so when it does come your way. So we asked him specifically about the liquor license and how that would apply to his business, and he told us that he would not have to apply for one from anywhere, the state nor the city, because it was private events, and it would be as if you were hosting like a barbecue in your backyard and providing beer to your guests in your home. So that was how he explained it to us. So that may be something else to address with him.
Well, I think to follow up on that point, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if we say no to the beer license, they can still have the dance hall.
Right.
And people can bring alcohol in with them. So that's, I think, what Amy's saying is, and if that's what he's representing, that is true. They can bring their own alcohol in at that point. They just can't sell it on the premises.
And that's our understanding. What he did in Provo.
And maybe that's what's happening in Provo.
Yeah, he's not around.
So again, to be clear, I think that we're talking about whether we're going to allow a use in an ordinance in a particular area. And that's what we need to know, whether that's the use that we want to allow.
There, I think also is that, you allow the ordinance in there, and now granted, there haven't been any other requests, and so we kind of use.
There actually has.
Okay.
We have one waiting on the heels to see if this is approved.
So anyway, prior to this, we hadn't seen it before us, and so we're kind of using this as a case, because we had asked a lot of questions whether or not this is a good use for, for ordinance itself, and, just kind of addressing it. We also have to, I'll come back to us, correct me if I'm wrong, as a conditional use permit anyway.
Yeah.
So the actual event type thing, or whatever he wants to use it for, would have to come back to us beyond the ordinance.
It's conditional.
we're not just gonna let anybody who shows up and ask, they have to be somewhere.
No.
Okay, so we'll discuss it next week, and you might get it back real quick.
We did address it as an ordinance too, but we had a specific instance that we can talk through.
Okay, that's what happened. Sounds good.
And he also, he'll probably say this to you as well, but he said that if he cannot serve the alcohol there, he will not, he doesn't want the location. Yeah. So,
And
anyway,
again, we're not gonna rule on his thing.
right, no,
We're gonna
I'm
rule on the ordinance.
on the ordinance,
Yeah.
totally understand.
Okay, moving on.
Yeah, this is public hearing for ordinance 2015-11, is that right?
Mhm.
Indoor climate control facilities?
Right. So the council will recall, if I can say that right, that recently we had an applicant come forward and ask for this exact same thing in the CS2 zone in this same area that we're talking about, which was approved. We have another applicant now who wants to do that same thing in the Grove commercial sales just off of North County Boulevard on some property on the west side. So it's very similar type of zoning. It's a very similar, if not the exact same kind of request. I think he may have some specific modifications in the verbiage he's looking for in his instance, but he is looking for the ability to have indoor climate controlled storage in the commercial sales sub-district of the Grove zone, which is currently not either listed as permitted or conditional. And some of the things that we've looked at, well, here's his specific property. It's just, yeah, it's kind of hard to tell from there, but you've got the apartments
How
down.
close is it to the car storage place?
Car storage is right up here.
South of the Shamrock.
The Shamrock, yeah.
South of the Shamrock, I would say.
Right. So the proposal is that the applicant has requested this specific number to be conditionally approved. In other words, coming to the planning commission for conditional use permit. 200-foot setback from the road for the storage use. So in other words, that 200 feet, and I think this number he may have modified or is requesting a modification on that 150 or something, but we'll look at that. But the intent was that the frontage of the road should be reserved for commercial use, not storage. And less than 50% of project area can be storage. So that's the proposal so far.
So again, this is an applicant.
Yes.
Requesting modification to the code to allow their specific use.
Right. And that's normally how applicants change the code. They have a specific use in mind.
So remind me, Ken, did we create that number 6377 just with this most recent?
We did.
And did it have an element of security? It seems like we spent a lot of time talking about the level of security you would have.
As far as the code requirement is concerned, I don't think we have that in there as a requirement, but that's normally something that will follow these type of facilities.
So in this case, it's adding the land use type or the permitted use type conditional use permit over to another zone.
Right.
Okay.
And Ken, if I understand that, then the frontage is still gonna be protected for retail, potential
Right.
retail use.
Right. Or permitted
We
uses
don't
in
have
that
these
zone.
right up on the street that could be taken away.
Exactly.
Okay.
I don't know if he owns it, but I think he's in a contract.
Okay. Anything else on that one? Okay, next one is public hearing for an ordinance 2015-13, amending Pleasant Grove Municipal Code Section 1134 to allow temporary access for subdivisions to be abandoned when standard street access becomes available.
Oh, did we skip one or am I out of order here?
Maybe I skipped one. Landscape buffer size, yeah.
Yeah.
2015-12.
Okay, this request, probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip forward to a visual here and we can back up. Okay, so if you recognize this project, it's on 700 South at the Steeplechase subdivision. We have two buildings of 4 units each that are called the live work units. So the bottom floor facing the street are commercial units, and then above that are the residential condominiums. So what we're looking at, the applicant is wanting to do this same type of development on his property, which is called Garden Grove at this point. Isn't that what we're calling? I believe that's the name. Anyway, this is Proctor Lane or 1300 West. Across the street is the LDS Church. You've got Cambria condos and such over here. So this 8-acre piece owned by the Bean family is under contract to develop a multifamily development. It's zoned already for that. And so they've given us their proposal under the current revised ordinance, which in this case requires 3 different types of housing product, the majority of which needs to be either single family or twin homes or 2-family type dwellings. So one of the 3 that they are proposing is this live-work unit that we have on 700 South. So they want to put those along the frontage of Proctor Lane. Currently what we require with these multifamily projects is a 25-foot landscaped setback. Now, in the case of the 700 South, we found that that was a bit hampering and challenging for that specific type of housing unit with a commercial fronting the road to have this big front yard without parking. Yeah. So the parking for these commercial units is just on the street or to the rear. Now on the street actually is not considered legal parking for this development. It's because it's an arterial road. It's not, there's not actually supposed to be those types of parking there. Parking was planned to the rear of these units to accommodate the commercial uses. However, that is not real good use access to the commercial buildings. So what they are wanting to do with this project is to change the setback requirement for these specific types of units, live-work units, so that we only have a 10-foot landscape setback here, allowing more of a parking area to occur here, that they're not so far set back from the street, but they have a little better commercial type access in front of their unit. So that's the request they're making to amend the ordinance to allow specifically for live-work units the ability to have a lesser landscape setback or buffer area.
So what is the buffer now?
25 feet.
And it's going down to 10?
10.
And so then the sidewalk will be right up against the road.
Right. It can be up against the road, or it can be meandering through that 10-foot area, or it could actually be on the back side. I think, isn't that what we...
So the 10-foot setback on the landscaping is on their property. So we'll still have a 6-foot walk then in the public right of way and the 5-foot planter.
Oh, good.
So
Okay.
you still have the 11 feet.
Okay. So this is
from
just
property
their
line to the curb.
landscaping and their buffer.
The sidewalk itself can be included in the setback area. So you're probably talking about that.
I'm just saying from the right of way line they're going to dedicate from includes the walk and a
Right.
5-foot planter within the public street.
Right.
So there is some additional landscaping there in addition to the 10 feet.
So you'll get the landscaping strip, then the sidewalk, then this.
That's not my understanding, Dagan. My understanding is we're talking only 10 feet here.
From the curb.
From the curb. So that includes a sidewalk and some strip of
Minimum
landscaping.
requirements for the right of way is going to take up 11 feet.
Okay.
So there will be no landscaping on their property.
Oh, okay.
So, okay, so you've got what's the 11 feet consisting of?
5-foot planter, a 6-foot sidewalk.
Okay.
That's the minimum requirement
Okay.
for arterial.
Okay, so then that's what we'll have is an 11-foot. So we'll have to make sure that they understand that. So we could change it from 10 to 11, I suppose. But yeah. So the sidewalk is included in that buffer area. Otherwise, throughout the zone, the sidewalk is included in the buffer area.
So Dagan, is the sidewalk included in the buffer area?
If that's the way that's not what I understood was happening. So I'm just pointing out that when they build our collector standard, they will have the curb, back of the curb, of a 5-foot planter strip, they'll have a 6-foot walk. So then that's the edge of the city's right of way. So what we're saying is they can have parking lot right to the back of the site.
So do we need to clear it up before we discuss it?
No, I think we've approached this in different ways, but I think the only difference really is that it's 11 feet and not 10.
Can we have it cleared up by next next week so that we're getting
Yes.
one definition and one picture?
Yes, we will do
Because it
that.
makes a big difference, I think.
And it'll make a big difference to the developer.
I know the developer, his application did not consider any additional landscaped area. So what he was considering was curb, gutter, landscape, sidewalk in 10 feet. So we're going to have to adjust that to 11
But is
feet.
the sidewalks on this side?
Right, the way he's showing it there. So that doesn't meet the standard, but we did talk to him about adjusting that to put the sidewalk on the other
We're
side.
not going down on the size of the sidewalk.
Right. So there will be, you'll just flip that around.
Because, I mean, our sidewalks are our trails, so we went with the 10 feet.
I might be misunderstanding this, but as I'm listening, it sounds to me like we have a disagreement as to what the ordinance says and how it's represented. And since some of us are visual people, you know, we look at something and we go, oh, that's what we're doing. And then the interpretation of how it's to be applied is different.
Right, so I think what we need to do for next week is make sure that the presentation accurately reflects the way that community development is going to interpret it and enforce it when the applicants come in. If the council's not comfortable with that explanation next week, then you just move to continue and ask them to come back and revise it or do a better job explaining it or whatever the issue is. Because it's already advertised as a public hearing.
Right, so we have to go through it. Yeah.
If somebody could check on the noticing, is it mentioned 10 feet in the noticing or is it just amending the landscape?
I don't see it in the description here, the agenda description doesn't say 10 feet.
Let's look up the.
So I just wanted to make sure the noticing would still be applicable if we change the 10 to 11.
Yeah, that's an important word.
Let me just look it up here.
I don't see the noticing, all I have is what's on the agenda, so.
Well, that would be the same thing. What is on the agenda would be the
agenda
noticing.
just
You
says
mean the short description?
Yes.
The
Doesn't
agenda just
mention.
says reduce the size of the buffer. It doesn't
Okay.
have a-
All right, so then we should be okay if we change the 10 to 11.
It should be okay, as long as what comes out in the drawing and everything are in agreement, we don't have.
I think we understand each other now. It's just
I
that,
wasn't trying to contradict what Ken was saying, I was just clarifying that there's 11 feet is our requirement for the road, so.
Ken, I think in the planning commission meeting, the applicant understood that we were gonna have to adjust it to 11 feet.
oh, did he? I don't
Yeah.
recall that.
But we'll follow up with the.
We'll make sure the applicant understands and we'll reflect it on the presentation.
Okay, thanks, Ken.
Mhm.
Any other? Let's skip one, no? Okay, so
I'm
now we're
actually
at,
surprised that you got a picture on 7th South there without the school traffic.
Right time of day.
so now we're on item F. Ordinance 2015-13, amending municipal code 1134 to allow temporary access for subdivisions.
Right.
Okay.
So the council will recall that you've had discussion previously with Kevin Peterson with his property accessed off of 2600 North. So he initially wanted to do a flag lot and we determined that wasn't the best way to do it. He came back with a proposal to meet the city's vicinity plans for road access, at least not meet it the way it's done, but to come up with an alternative so that there's actually going to be a future road access from the west into this property, that he would go ahead and construct the end of the cul-de-sac and allow for future extension to the west, but that until that future extension occurs on property which he does not control or own, that there would be a temporary access coming down here to 2600. Which in essence would be the flag lot stem. So if we were to approve a flag lot in this area, this would be the access and it would just be a turnaround here. There wouldn't be this other roadway here. But so that the city can in the future accomplish a city street into that area rather than just a closed off flag lot subdivision that doesn't otherwise have a city street access. His proposal is to say, let's go ahead and create my portion of the street and let's just temporarily access it until the time that it can otherwise be accessed on the finished city street. that is his proposal. It seems to be the best way to meet several challenges in developing this property that staff has found in review. So he came forward with this proposal. It's been to Planning Commission and received positive recommendation.
Creative.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where's the do we have an overall area plan? What's it called?
Vicinity plan? Yeah, we'll pull that out. I don't think we have that on the presentation right now, but
The other one showed the cul-de-sac coming, or a road coming from that bulb up on the right-hand side.
right, the city vicinity plan comes down through here like that, but in meeting with these property owners, it's like no way, no how. And so he needed an alternative to be able to develop that.
Vicinity next week.
Right, vicinity is our guide, and we like to follow it as much as possible, but if the developer comes up with an alternative that we think works, then we can go with that.
Right.
Yeah, but
But I
this is
still
a
would like
little
to
bit
see
different
what-
because you're creating the cul-de-sac without the stem.
Right,
You're creating the endpoint without the beginning.
exactly.
Which forces the beginning.
Right.
So it's a little different
It's
situation.
a hybrid situation here. So if you think of it,
The vicinity map or the vicinity map becomes critical. in
right,
enforcing.
right. So if this were to be just a flag lot, then that would cut off this access as planned in the vicinity map, and it would also cut off access from this way. This way it allows for future access there, planning for it and acting temporarily as a flag lot subdivision.
Because that's a big
And we don't know how
open
long
space to the
temporary-
west of that, so
Yeah.
I'd like to see where
Could be
that
100 years.
can go.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other discussion on that?
Do you recall what the vote was in the planning commission on this one? Was it unanimous or was it divided? Unanimous.
Okay, item 11, we'll have a discussion on the budget and also on the Public Safety Building Citizen Committee application. There'll be no meeting on the 7th, and then we have our other items to discuss. Okay, coming back to tonight, no plats. Reviewing the calendar. So this is March's calendar. Do we have an April calendar? Not yet. Okay. So the only thing at this point is the spring break from the 4th through the 12th. Is that right?
6th of the, well, technically it's 6th of the 13th.
Technically the week, but then we also
Yeah.
Friday or Saturday through Sunday.
Actually, it's the 3rd to the 13th.
That's the way I read it. Okay, any other business? Motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Okay, motion by Sid, second by Ben.